You won't believe what this man lived with for nearly 5 years, and how a single moment at the doctor's office changed everything. This is the story of Anil, a 30-year-old schoolteacher from a small village near Bhubaneswar, India. For most of his life, Anil had lived quietly, simply, surrounded by family, students, and the familiar rhythm of rural life. But all of that began to unravel the day he noticed something unusual about his left eyelid. It began as the tiniest of swellings, barely noticeable to anyone but him. At first, he assumed it was a sty or perhaps some irritation from dust. Living in a farming region, minor eye issues weren't uncommon. But, unlike other times, this one didn't go away. Days turned into weeks, and the swelling only seemed to persist. And slowly, it began to grow. Anil brushed it off again and again. He had responsibilities, a classroom full of students, aging parents to care for, and a job he couldn't afford to miss. Besides, the nearest hospital with real specialists was hours away. And in his heart, he believed it would go away on its own. But it didn't. Months passed. The swelling had now spread down from his eyelid, creeping along the side of his face. Still, he refused to stop working. He used scarves and sunglasses to cover the area. When people asked, he joked that it was an allergic reaction, a skin condition, anything to avoid facing the truth that something inside him was growing. And he had no idea what it was. After a year, things became impossible to ignore. What once had been a small irritation was now a soft, bulbous mass drooping from the side of his face. It obscured his left eye completely. His vision was now limited to one side. He had to hold his head at strange angles just to read a page or look at his students' faces. It wasn't just a cosmetic issue anymore. It was affecting his ability to teach, to walk, to live. The mass had stretched down from his face and neck, resting heavily against his chest. He could feel people staring. Children whispered. Neighbors speculated. Friends stopped visiting. But Anil endured. Quietly. Alone. By year 5, the tumor had grown to nearly the size of a small football, roughly 15 centimeters long and weighing over a kilogram. It was soft, discolored, and pulsing with a strange warmth. Some nights, Anil swore he could feel it throb as if it had a pulse of its own. It wasn't painful exactly, but it was heavy, like carrying a burden that literally hung off the side of his face. He had reached his limit. One morning, after struggling to see out of his remaining eye and nearly walking into a moving bicycle, Anil made a decision. He could no longer pretend this was something that would pass. He packed a small bag, took a day off school, and boarded the early morning bus bound for Bhubaneswar. 6 hours later, he walked into the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, his head low, scarf pulled tight around his face. The receptionist didn't even blink. The hospital had seen everything. She handed him a file and sent him to the ENT department. What followed was a whirlwind of tests, scans, and evaluations. Doctors huddled, whispered, measured the mass, photographed it, and studied its surface. Finally, Anil sat face to face with a surgeon who gave him an answer he hadn't expected. And yet, deep down, had feared all along. "This is not a simple growth," the doctor said gently. "You've been living with a parasite." Anil blinked, stunned. A parasite? Inside him? The scans showed that the mass wasn't just skin and tissue. It was a rare condition caused by a microorganism called Rhinosporidium seeberei, a pathogen found in stagnant water sources like ponds and lakes. The doctor explained that the parasite likely entered Anil's body through a tiny lesion in his eye while he was bathing years ago. Once inside, it had begun to grow, slowly at first, then relentlessly. It had triggered a chronic infection that led to the formation of a benign but aggressive tumor known as an angiofibroma. While not cancerous, it had spread deep beneath the skin, tangled around nerves and tissue. Anil was lucky, the doctor told him. The mass hadn't yet invaded his brain or sinuses, but it was dangerously close. The surgical team prepared immediately. The operation would take hours. It wasn't just about removing the tumor, it was about reconstructing what was left of Anil's face, salvaging what they could, and trying to restore his sight. As Anil lay on the operating table, anesthetic pulling him into sleep, his final thought was of his students. Would they recognize him when he returned? Would he recognize himself? The surgery was long and delicate. Surgeons worked through layers of blood vessels, removing the tumor in sections. It had embedded itself deeply, resisting separation from Anil's cheekbone and jawline. But finally, after nearly 8 hours, it was done. The tumor was out. When Anil awoke, the world was a blur. Bandages covered most of his face, and he could only feel the pressure of gauze and stitches. The doctors smiled. "It's out," one of them said. "You're going to be okay." Recovery was slow, painful, but transformative. Within weeks, the swelling subsided, the infection faded, and for the first time in years, Anil looked into a mirror and saw himself truly, without the mass that had haunted his every waking moment. His vision in the left eye had been partially restored. His scars would remain, but they were a reminder of what he'd survived. The doctors told him that, had he waited even a few more months, the infection could have reached his brain. When Anil returned home, his entire village gathered at the school to greet him. Children cheered. His fellow teachers cried. And as he stepped into the classroom, one little boy ran up to him and asked, "Sir, is your monster gone now?" Anil smiled. "Yes," he said, "it's gone." But he never forgot what it taught him, that health is fragile, that time is precious, and that the quietest battles are often the most courageous. Anil's story became a local legend, not because he faced a monster, but because he had the strength to face it alone, until he didn't have to anymore.